He was the last American president born in a log cabin, a symbol of the dream that anyone could rise from nothing to the highest office in the land. His journey from the dirt floors of the Ohio wilderness to the White House is a testament to pure, unbreakable resolve. But this is not a story of triumph. It is one of America's great tragedies. After just 200 days in office, an assassin's bullet cut his story short, sparking a national ordeal that would test the country's very soul. So what forges a man capable of such a remarkable rise, only to meet such a cruel end? This is the human story of James A. Garfield, the boy who survived the frontier and the president his nation could not save. To understand young James Garfield, we have to step back into the America of the 1830s, a nation on the edge, literally. The frontier was pushing west, but places like Orange Township in Ohio were still wild, untamed patches of forest and field. Families scratched out a living from rocky soil, relying on small farms, handmade tools, and sheer willpower. The Erie Canal had just opened a few years earlier, transforming sleepy towns into hubs of trade. But for most, life was a grind of endless labor. Poverty wasn't just common, it was the norm for immigrants and settlers chasing the promise of a better tomorrow. Religion played a huge role too. The Disciples of Christ movement was sweeping through, emphasizing personal faith and community over fancy churches. It was into this world of hardship and faith that James entered the world on November 19, 1831, the youngest of 5 children in a humble home that was more shelter than sanctuary. His father, Abram Garfield, a sturdy man of Welsh-English descent, had wrestled the land into a modest 80-acre farm. Abram was known for his strength. He could fell trees with a single swing and had a reputation as a local wrestler, but fate dealt a cruel blow. In 1833, when James was just 18 months old, Abram caught a fever, possibly pneumonia, after battling a forest fire to save the family's crops. He lingered for days, whispering final words to his wife Eliza before passing. The loss shattered the family. Eliza, with her French Huguenot roots and unyielding faith in the disciples of Christ, was left alone to raise the kids on that isolated plot. She milked cows, plowed fields, and mended clothes by candlelight, all while instilling in her children a deep sense of morality and the power of Scripture. James would later recall her as the rock of his world, a woman whose prayers and stories from the Bible shaped his soul. But poverty bit hard. Meals were often just cornmeal mush, and shoes were a luxury patched together from scraps. As a boy, James, called Jim by those who knew him, threw himself into the chores that kept the farm afloat. By age 8, he was chopping wood, herding cattle, and helping with the harvest, his small hands calloused from dawn to dusk. Neighbors whispered about the Garfield struggles, and schoolyard bullies taunted him for his ragged clothes and fatherless home. He earned the nickname Wild Child for his fiery temper, often scrapping with boys who mocked his poverty or called him an orphan. These fights left scars, not just physical ones, but deep emotional wounds that fueled a lifelong drive for respect. Yet, amid the hardship, there were glimmers of joy. James devoured books borrowed from neighbors, tales of adventure on the high seas, inspired by his Welsh ancestors' seafaring legends. He dreamed of escaping the farm, of sailing vast oceans where no one knew his humble roots. His mother encouraged this curiosity, scraping together pennies for a simple education at the local log schoolhouse when he was just 4. Eliza believed knowledge was the key to rising above their station, a belief rooted in her religious conviction that God rewarded the diligent. But life threw more curveballs. In 1842, when James was 11, Eliza remarried a man named Warren Belden, hoping for stability. It was a disaster. Belden proved unkind, and the marriage crumbled into scandal. A rare divorce in the straight-laced Victorian era, finalized in 1850 amid whispers of abuse and neglect. James stood fiercely by his mother, even jotting in his diary years later, well into adulthood, a lingering resentment toward Belden that bordered on hatred. This family fracture deepened his sense of isolation, turning him inward. He confided in few, but his writings reveal a boy grappling with abandonment. The safe world of childhood ended too soon, he might have thought, echoing the pain of loss that marked his youth. Historians like Alan Peskin, in his biography Garfield, speculate that around this time, James may have contracted hepatitis, a hidden illness that sapped his energy and explained later health woes, though no records confirm it. It's one of those overlooked details, a quiet battle with sickness amid the chaos that adds layers to his resilience. By 16, in 1847, James's dreams of adventure boiled over. Tired of the farm's drudgery, he bolted for Cleveland, lured by stories of sailors on Lake Erie. He envisioned himself as a swashbuckling mariner, conquering waves like the heroes in his books. But reality hit like a cold splash. Ship captains turned him away, seeing only a scrawny farm boy. Desperate, he took a job on the Ohio Erie Canal, driving mules that pulled barges laden with goods. It was grueling. Long hours in rain and mud, hauling ropes that blistered his hands. Worse, the canal was treacherous. James, who couldn't swim a stroke, fell overboard not once but 16 times in just 6 weeks. Each plunge was a brush with death, gasping for air, clinging to the mule's harness or a passing branch. One night, after a particularly terrifying dunking, he contracted malaria, his body racked with fever. Delirious and defeated, he dragged himself home, promising Eliza he'd turn to books instead. This episode, rarely highlighted in textbooks, became a turning point. As he later reflected in a letter, poverty is uncomfortable, but 9 times out of 10, the best thing that can happen to a young man is to be tossed overboard and compelled to sink or swim. It was his first real taste of failure and survival. Back home, James threw himself into learning with the same ferocity he'd shown in fights. From 1848 to 1850, he attended Goga Seminary, a coeducational school in Chester Township. There, he met Lucretia Rudolph, a bright, quiet girl who would later become his wife. He excelled in languages, debate, and math, paying his way by carpentry and teaching younger kids. But money was tight. He often went hungry, surviving on bread and milk. In 1850, at 19, James experienced a religious awakening during a camp meeting, a fervent Disciples of Christ gathering. He waded into the Chagrin River for a full immersion baptism, emerging with a renewed sense of purpose. It felt like rebirth, he wrote in his journal, a rare glimpse into his inner world, where faith battled doubt. This moment, often glossed over, humanizes him, a young man seeking solace in spirituality amid personal storms. He pushed on to the Western Reserve Eclectic Institute, now Hiram College, from 1851 to 1854. Here, he studied Greek, Latin, and theology, supporting himself as a janitor, teacher, and itinerant preacher, earning a gold dollar per sermon. His voice, honed in debates, began to command attention. Then in 1854, he transferred to Williams College in Massachusetts, a prestigious Eastern school that exposed him to a wider world. Graduating in 1856 as salutatorian and a Phi Beta Kappa member, he credited President Mark Hopkins for inspiring him. The ideal college is Mark Hopkins on one end of a log and a student on the other. This self-made education wasn't just academic. It was emotional armor, reducing the sting of his Western roots and proving he belonged. These years weren't without hidden struggles. James confided in letters about loneliness, the weight of poverty making him feel like an outsider among wealthier peers. One untold anecdote. During a college break, he returned home to find the farm in disarray, forcing him to chop wood through a blizzard to keep his mother warm. It's these private moments that reveal his humanity, the boy who fought bullies now battling self-doubt. And a little-known fact, James was ambidextrous, able to write Latin with one hand and Greek with the other simultaneously. A parlor trick that dazzled classmates but stemmed from hours of solitary practice, perhaps a way to escape his inner turmoil. Controversies swirl around Garfield's early narrative, even if they're subtle. Some historians debate the self-made man myth. Was his rise pure grit, or aided by community networks like the Disciples' Church? The divorce scandal, explosive for its time, painted Eliza as defiant, but drew judgment on the family. Opposing views question if his canal near-drownings were exaggerated for political flair later on, though diaries confirmed the terror. And there's the health mystery. Peskin's theory of childhood hepatitis adds a layer of vulnerability, suggesting his drive masked physical frailty. These debates remind us Garfield wasn't a flawless hero, but a complex figure shaped by contradictions, poverty breeding both insecurity and strength. To really grasp Garfield's world in the late 1850s, we need to transport ourselves to America on the brink. The nation was a powder keg, with tensions over slavery boiling over in places like Kansas and the halls of Congress. The Republican Party was just emerging, fueled by anti-slavery sentiments and a push for free soil, land open to settlers without the stain of bondage. In Ohio, where Garfield called home, life revolved around small farms, burgeoning canals, and a fervent religious revival. The Disciples of Christ movement, with its emphasis on scripture, community, and personal faith, was sweeping the Midwest, offering spiritual anchor in uncertain times. Education was a ladder out of poverty, but it was rare and hard-won, especially for someone like Garfield, who'd clawed his way from a log cabin childhood marked by his father's early death and his mother's unyielding determination. This era valued self-made men, but it also demanded conformity, stable families, moral uprightness, and public service. Garfield, at just 25 in 1856, embodied that spirit, a product of frontier grit, now stepping into roles that would test his intellect, his ethics, and his emotions. Let's trace Garfield's path chronologically, starting with his return to Ohio in 1856 after graduating from Williams College. Fresh from the refined air of Massachusetts, where he'd honed his skills in classics and debate, Garfield headed back to the Western Reserve Eclectic Institute, now Hiram College, in the quiet town of Hiram. He dove right in as a teacher, leading classes in mathematics, ancient languages like Greek and Latin, and literature. What set him apart wasn't just his knowledge, it was his passion. Students recalled his lectures as electric, blending rigorous analysis with real-world relevance. He'd weave in stories from Homer or Virgil to illustrate moral lessons, always tying them to the Disciples of Christ principles he held dear: equality before God, the power of Scripture, and co-education, which was progressive for the time. Women sat alongside men in his classrooms, a nod to his belief that intellect knew no gender bounds. By 1857, at the astonishing age of 26, he was promoted to principal. For a man who'd once driven mules on the Erie Canal and chopped wood to survive, this was a monumental leap. He managed the school's finances, recruited students, and even handled discipline, all while continuing to teach. His days were a whirlwind, mornings in the classroom, afternoons preaching sermons on ethics and the Bible to local congregations, evenings buried in books. This period marked his first taste of leadership, overseeing a faculty often rife with petty disputes over curriculum or pay. Garfield navigated it with a diplomat's touch, but privately, he chafed at the limitations. As one biographer notes in Alan Peskin's detailed work, Garfield, drawn from personal diaries, he confided that the bickering intolerable among staff made him question if education was his true calling. Yet it built his versatility from manual laborer to multifaceted intellectual, preparing him for the political arenas ahead. Amid this professional surge came a personal milestone, his marriage to Lucretia Rudolph on November 11, 1858, in Hiram. Lucretia, or Crete, as he affectionately called her, was no stranger. They'd met as students at Geauga Seminary back in 1851, where her sharp mind and shared disciples' faith caught his eye. She was the daughter of a local carpenter, intelligent and reserved, with a quiet strength that complemented Garfield's outgoing nature. Their courtship was drawn out, 7 years of letters and visits, marked by Garfield's hesitations. He proposed multiple times, but doubts lingered. In one letter from 1854, digitized in the Library of Congress's collection of their correspondence, Garfield wrote to her with clinical detachment, "I have for a series of years been acquainted with Miss Lucretia Rudolph, and have been for several months studying her nature and mind." It reads more like a scholarly assessment than a love note, reflecting his analytical bent. They wed in a simple ceremony at her parents' home, attended by friends and family. A fellow Hiram student even penned a celebratory poem for the occasion, captured in historical records. Two souls with but a single thought, two hearts that beat as one. But reality was far from poetic. The early years were strained. Garfield's ambitions kept him away. Preaching tours across Ohio, late nights at the Institute, leaving Lucretia to manage their modest home alone. Their letters reveal the chill. Garfield once described their bond as cold, admitting a lack of emotional spark. They welcomed 7 children over the years: Harry in 1863, James in 1865, Mary in 1867, Irvin in 1870, Abram in 1872. But 2 died young: Eliza in 1863 at just 3, and Edward in 1876 as a toddler. These losses, especially Eliza's, deepened their shared grief, but in these pre-war years, the marriage felt dutiful rather than passionate. By 1859, Garfield's horizons expanded beyond the classroom. He began self-studying law, poring over texts in stolen moments, and was admitted to the Ohio bar in 1861 by the state Supreme Court. He didn't hang a shingle for a full-time practice. Instead, law became a tool for greater pursuits. That same year, 1859, local Republicans tapped him for the Ohio State Senate, recognizing his oratory prowess and anti-slavery stance. Elected handily, he championed free soil policies, arguing against slavery's expansion into new territories. In debates on racial equality and economic issues, he shone, blending legal precision with moral fervor, one rarely discussed incident from this time. In 1858, just after his marriage, Garfield engaged in a week-long public debate with a traveling freethinker and evolutionist named William Denton. Held in a packed hall, the clash pitted Garfield's faith-based worldview against Denton's scientific skepticism. Garfield emerged victorious in the eyes of the audience, his arguments drawing on scripture and logic to defend creationism. This event, detailed in Peskin's biography and contemporary accounts, showcased his rhetorical gifts but also hinted at inner conflicts. a man of science and faith, torn between worlds. His letters to Lucretia, preserved in the Library of Congress, offer intimate glimpses. In one from 1857, before their wedding, he wrote, "I sometimes fear that my love for you is not that deep, fervent passion which should characterize the union of two hearts. It's a raw admission, revealing a young man grappling with expectations of romance versus reality. Their early marriage was marked by absences. Garfield's preaching tours took him across Ohio, where he'd deliver sermons on morality and scripture, earning modest fees that supplemented his principal's salary. Lucretia, left behind, managed household chores and her own teaching duties, her letters hinting at loneliness. The days stretch long without you. Yet there were joys too. The birth of their first child, Eliza, in 1860, brought fleeting happiness, though her death 3 years later would scar them profoundly. Garfield's diaries, as quoted in Frederick D. Williams's edited collection, The Wild Life of the Army Civil War Letters of James A. Garfield, show a man wrestling with guilt over his divided attentions. He once noted after a late-night study session, "The lamp burns low and my thoughts turn to home, where duty calls, but ambition pulls." These anecdotes humanize him, not as a flawless leader, but as a husband torn between providing for his family and chasing intellectual fulfillment. Of course, no life story is without shadows, and Garfield's harbors a controversy that adds nuance to his character. His extramarital affair with Lucia Calhoun, a young reporter for the New York Tribune. Though the liaison peaked around 1864, just after this period, its roots trace back to his Senate days and travels. Historical debates swirl around the details. Some sources, like the National First Lady's Library biography, suggest Garfield expressed regrets at his marriage early on, pursuing Calhoun out of emotional void. She was 18, vibrant, and intellectually stimulating, a contrast to Lucretia's reserved demeanor. In a 2014 C-SPAN transcript from a discussion on First Ladies, historian Candace Miller described it as a full-blown affair that nearly does end, the marriage. Garfield confessed to Lucretia in June 1864, during a visit home amid his military service, swearing it was over. Letters revealed posthumously show his remorse. "I have wounded you deeply, but my heart is yours." Debates persist. Was it a fleeting indiscretion born of loneliness or a sign of deeper dissatisfaction? Some biographers, like in E. Smalley's 1884 Century magazine piece, downplay it to preserve his image, while modern interpretations, such as in J. Mark Powell's blog on presidential scandals, highlight it as evidence of human frailty. Respectfully, this episode underscores Garfield's complexity. A devout Christian preacher entangled in moral conflict, his faith clashing with temptation. It invites rethinking, not as a villain, but as a man navigating Victorian-era pressures, where public piety masked private struggles. The consequences of these years rippled far beyond 1861, shaping Garfield's legacy in profound ways. His teaching and preaching honed the oratory that propelled him to military command in the Civil War, where he rose to Major General. The law and Senate experience equipped him for 9 terms in Congress, advocating civil rights and economic reform. Emotionally, the rocky marriage evolved into a rock-solid partnership. By the war's end, Lucretia became his confidant, her support crucial during his brief presidency. Culturally, Garfield's story embodies the Gilded Age's self-made ethos, inspiring generations on the value of education and perseverance. Politically, his anti-slavery stance foreshadowed Reconstruction efforts, influencing policies on equality that echo in today's civil rights discussions. We learn from him the cost of ambition, how it can strain relationships yet forge resilience. In a world of instant fame, Garfield matters as a reminder that true leadership stems from quiet, formative struggles. The American Civil War, erupting in 1861, was a defining clash over slavery, states' rights, and the Union's future, pitting brother against brother in a nation deeply divided. In the North, particularly Ohio, abolitionist sentiments ran strong, fueled by religious movements like the Disciples of Christ, which emphasized moral equality and personal duty. Garfield, then 29, had built a life as a teacher and preacher, shaped by his impoverished upbringing and self-taught education. The war's outbreak stirred his patriotic fervor. He viewed secession as a grave threat to the republic he cherished. This era demanded rapid adaptation. Civilians like Garfield, lacking formal military training, filled the ranks through volunteer regiments. The conflict's early phases were marked by disorganized armies, high casualties from disease as much as combat, and evolving strategies. Garfield's entry into this maelstrom reflected a broader cultural shift. Intellectuals and professionals enlisting to preserve the Union, blending idealism with the harsh realities of 19th century warfare, where tactics still echoed Napoleonic eras, but technology like rifled muskets amplified the carnage. Garfield's military journey began in earnest in August 1861, when he accepted the lieutenant colonelcy of the 42nd Ohio Volunteer Infantry, a regiment he helped recruit largely from his former students at the Western Reserve Eclectic Institute. Despite months of waiting for a commission, a delay that frustrated him as noted in his personal correspondence, he embraced the role with zeal. Promoted to colonel within weeks, he trained his men rigorously, drawing on self-studied military texts to compensate for his inexperience. His opposition to secession and slavery drove this decision. As a fervent Republican, he saw the war as a moral crusade. By December 1861, the 42nd was deployed to eastern Kentucky, where Garfield's strategic acumen shone in the Big Sandy Valley campaign. In January 1862, at the Battle of Middle Creek, part of this broader operation, he outmaneuvered Confederate forces under Humphrey Marshall, securing Union control with minimal losses. This victory, achieved against superior numbers through clever positioning and feints, earned him promotion to brigadier general at age 30. A rarely discussed aspect here is Garfield's personal involvement in logistics. He personally scouted terrain in harsh winter conditions, enduring frostbite risks that underscored his hands-on leadership. Following this success, Garfield's brigade joined the Army of the Ohio in Tennessee. In April 1862, he arrived on the second day of the Battle of Shiloh, commanding the 20th Brigade and helping stabilize Union lines amid the bloody stalemate. The battle's ferocity left a mark. Garfield witnessed thousands fallen, including friends from his regiment. However, the physical toll was severe. He contracted dysentery and camp fever shortly after, forcing a medical leave that summer. This overlooked incident highlights the war's non-combat horrors. Disease claimed more lives than bullets, and Garfield's recovery at home in Ohio allowed reflection on the conflict's brutality. Returning in August 1863 as Chief of Staff to Major General William S. Rosecrans in the Army of the Cumberland, Garfield played a key advisory role. The pinnacle came in September 1863 at the Battle of Chickamauga in Georgia. On the second day, as Union forces crumbled under Confederate assault, Garfield volunteered for a perilous ride to rally troops and deliver orders. Dubbed the Ride of Garfield, he galloped through enemy fire for miles, his horse shot from under him, yet he reached General George H. Thomas, helping hold Snodgrass Hill and prevent total rout. Though the battle was a Union defeat, Garfield's actions saved the army from annihilation, earning him promotion to Major General. He sustained a minor wound, but the episode's drama is amplified by eyewitness accounts. One aide recalled Garfield arriving covered in dust and blood, his face set with determination, as documented in period reports. Garfield's service concluded in December 1863 when he resigned to take a seat in Congress, advised by President Abraham Lincoln, who needed staunch supporters in the House amid wartime politics. Retaining his major general rank honorarily until 1865, this shift prioritized legislative strategy over field command, aligning military efforts with political necessities like funding and emancipation policies. Delving into the personal realm, Garfield's letters and diaries reveal a man profoundly affected by the war's human cost. In a missive to his wife Lucretia, after Shiloh, he wrote, "The horrors of the battlefield are beyond description. The groans of the wounded and dying haunt my sleep." A quote from his preserved correspondence that exposes his emotional vulnerability. This admission contrasts his public heroism with private torment, as he grappled with the loss of comrades, including those from his student-recruited regiment. Eyewitness memories from subordinates paint him as approachable. One soldier in the 42nd Ohio recounted Garfield sharing campfires, discussing philosophy amid the mud, fostering loyalty that endured. His health struggles during leave evoked guilt. He felt abandoned his men, as confided in a diary entry, highlighting the inner conflict between duty and self-preservation. A striking lesser-known anecdote. During lulls between battles, Garfield sketched a mathematical proof of a Pythagorean theorem variant using a trapezoid, later published in 1876. This intellectual pursuit amid chaos, detailed in his notes, offered solace, revealing a mind that sought order in turmoil. Another emotional fact, at Chickamauga, upon finding Rosecrans distraught and unable to command, sitting with head in hands as an aide described, Garfield assumed initiative, a moment of quiet resolve that saved lives but weighed on his conscience. Controversies surrounding Garfield's service add complexity. At Chickamauga, whispers emerge that he undermined Rosecrans, his superior, by reporting the general's emotional breakdown to Washington, possibly to advance his own ambitions or those of allies like Secretary of the Treasury Salmon P. Chase. Some historians, drawing from Henry Villard's contemporary accounts, suggest Garfield's dispatches contributed to Rosecrans's removal, portraying him as disloyal. Opposing views from biographers like Peskin argue it was honest reporting under duress, not betrayal, emphasizing Garfield's loyalty to the Union cause. Debates also touch on his rapid promotions, merit-based or politically influenced by Republican connections. These interpretations invite nuance. Garfield as ambitious opportunist versus principled leader with history unsettled due to incomplete records. Respectfully, such debates humanize him, showing how war's pressures blurred lines between strategy and self-interest. The long-term significance of Garfield's military tenure extends deeply into American history. His battlefield experiences informed his post-war politics, fostering advocacy for reconciliation and civil rights. As a congressman, he supported Reconstruction policies shaped by his anti-slavery stance. Emotionally, the war's scars influenced his brief presidency, where he pushed merit-based reforms, echoing his merit-earned promotions. Culturally, Garfield exemplifies the citizen soldier ideal, inspiring narratives of ordinary valor in conflicts, from World War II to today. Politically, his service bolstered the Republican Party's image, aiding figures like Grant. We learn from him the value of adaptability, intellect in action, and the cost of leadership, where moral decisions linger. In modern times, amid debates on military-civilian transitions, Garfield matters as a bridge, reminding us that true heroism involves not just bravery, but ethical navigation of chaos. The post-Civil War United States, often dubbed the Gilded Age, was a time of glittering progress masking deep-seated rot. Reconstruction aimed to knit the fractured nation back together, granting freed slaves citizenship through amendments like the 14th and 15th, but it faced fierce resistance from Southern Democrats and even Northern moderates. Corruption flourished in Washington, fueled by the spoils system where political jobs went to loyalists, not the qualified. Railroads boomed, symbolizing industrial might, yet scandals like bribes and kickbacks tainted the era's optimism. Garfield, fresh from battlefield glory, entered this arena as a radical Republican from Ohio's 19th District, a region of farms and factories where abolitionist fervor ran high. Shaped by his disciples of Christ faith and self-made rise from poverty, he embodied the Midwest's moral compass, advocating for equality while pushing economic policies to protect American industry. This period tested leaders like him. Could idealism survive the grind of legislation, or would compromise erode principles? Garfield's congressional odyssey kicked off in 1862 when, still in uniform as a Union general, Ohio voters elected him to the House of Representatives. He didn't take his seat until December 1863 after resigning his military commission on President Lincoln's advice. Lincoln needed reliable allies in Congress to sustain the war effort. Representing the 19th District, a stronghold of anti-slavery sentiment in northeastern Ohio, Garfield served 9 consecutive terms until 1880, amassing a record of steady influence. Early on, he aligned with the radical Republicans, pushing for aggressive Reconstruction in the South to ensure lasting freedom for African Americans. He was instrumental in crafting and passing the 14th Amendment in 1868, which granted citizenship and equal protection under the law, and the 15th Amendment in 1870 securing voting rights for black men. These weren't abstract debates for Garfield. His wartime experiences, witnessing the horrors of slavery's aftermath, drove his commitment. As chair of the House Appropriations Committee from 1871 onward, he wielded power over federal spending, advocating for a gold standard to stabilize currency and high protective tariffs to shield nascent industries from foreign competition. This economic conservatism balanced his social radicalism, fostering industrial growth in states like Ohio, while funding Reconstruction programs. A pivotal moment came in 1868 with the impeachment of President Andrew Johnson. Garfield played a key role as a House manager in the trial, prosecuting Johnson for violating the Tenure of Office Act by firing Secretary of War Edwin Stanton without Senate approval. Johnson's leniency toward the South clashed with radical goals, and Garfield's eloquent arguments in the Senate trial highlighted his legal acumen, honed from self-studied law and moral outrage. Though Johnson was acquitted by 1 vote, the episode solidified Garfield's reputation as a principled fighter. Moving into the 1870s, he navigated intra-party rifts aligning with the half-breeds, a reform faction favoring civil service changes over the patronage, heavy stalwarts led by New York Senator Roscoe Conkling. This tension boiled over in debates on spoils system abuses, where Garfield pushed for merit-based appointments. In 1877, he reluctantly supported the compromise that ended Reconstruction by withdrawing federal troops from the South in exchange for Rutherford B. Hayes's presidency, a deal that preserved Republican power but betrayed Southern blacks, a regret that lingered in Garfield's private writings. By the late 1870s, Garfield's leadership shone brighter. He served as minority leader during Hayes's administration, orchestrating opposition strategies with a blend of rhetoric and negotiation, a rarely discussed incident from this era. In 1877, Garfield delivered a marathon speech on the repeal of the Resumption Act, arguing for sound money policies amid economic panic. Lasting over 3 hours, it showcased his intellectual depth, drawing on historical precedents and economic theory, but it also exhausted him physically. Diaries note his subsequent illness, a hidden toll of his relentless drive. As the decade closed, Garfield won election to the U.S. Senate in January 1880, but never served. At the Republican National Convention that June, after 36 ballots deadlocked between Ulysses S. Grant and James G. Blaine, delegates turned to Garfield as a compromise candidate for president. He accepted reluctantly, viewing it as duty over ambition. Throughout these years, Garfield's personal life intertwined with his public role, revealing a man of profound intellect and hidden vulnerabilities. His diaries, preserved in the Library of Congress, offer intimate glimpses. Entries from the 1870s describe late-night reflections on legislative defeats, like the frustration over stalled civil rights bills, where he wrote, "The nation's wounds heal slowly, and my heart aches for the oppressed." These words capture his emotional investment in Reconstruction, a cause he saw as a moral imperative rooted in his faith. Correspondence with Lucretia, his wife, paints a supportive partnership amid the chaos. In one 1872 letter, amid the Credit Mobilier fallout, he confided, "The accusations wound me deeply, but your faith sustains me," highlighting the emotional strain of scandals on their family. Eyewitness accounts from colleagues describe Garfield's parlor tricks to lighten tense Washington dinners. He'd demonstrate his ambidexterity by writing Latin with one hand and Greek with the other simultaneously, a skill honed in college that amazed guests like diplomat John Hay, who recalled, "It was as if two minds worked in harmony, a testament to his boundless curiosity." This talent, often overlooked, symbolized his multifaceted nature, a left-handed president, the first though he hid it due to Victorian-era stigmas associating left-handedness with weakness or deviance, who defied conventions. Financial papers reveal quieter struggles. Despite his salary, Garfield juggled debts from his growing family, 7 children, 2 lost young, leading to modest living and occasional loans from friends, a far cry from the era's ostentatious wealth. The controversies of Garfield's congressional tenure add shades of gray to his legacy, none more defining than the Credit Mobilier scandal of 1872. Exposed by the New York Sun, it involved Union Pacific Railroad executives creating a sham construction company, Credit Mobilier, to siphon federal funds through inflated contracts. Congressman Oakes Ames distributed discounted stock to influential colleagues to secure favorable legislation. Garfield was accused of accepting 10 shares worth $329 in dividends, which he claimed was a loan from Ames, not a bribe. He testified he never owned the stock and returned the money. Investigations by House committees cleared him of direct corruption, but the taint lingered. Critics argued his involvement, even peripheral, exemplified the Gilded Age's spoil system, where personal gain blurred public service. Debates persist. Some historians, citing Ames's testimony that Garfield agreed to take the shares, view it as willful complicity, while others, like in Alan Peskin's biography, see it as naivety, a busy congressman ensnared in a web of influence without intent. Garfield defended himself vehemently during his 1880 campaign, writing in a letter preserved by the Robb collection, "I've never owned $1 of Credit Mobilier stock. The charge is false and malicious. This episode humanizes him, showing a principled man grappling with perceptions that threatened his hard-earned honor. Another nuance. His role in the Fitz-John Porter court-martial in 1878 to 1879, where he helped retry and exonerate a Union general scapegoated for battlefield failures, sparked debates on military justice. Garfield's advocacy for fairness clashed with stalwart views, underscoring his reformist leanings amid party fractures. Garfield's congressional service left an indelible mark on American history, shaping policies that echoed long after his era. His support for the 14th and 15th Amendments laid constitutional groundwork for civil rights, influencing movements from the 1960s onward. Though the Compromise of 1877's end to Reconstruction enabled Jim Crow laws, a bittersweet legacy he lamented privately. Economically, his tariff advocacy bolstered industrial growth, contributing to America's rise as a global power, while his anti-corruption stance foreshadowed the Pendleton Act of 1883, enacted after his assassination. Emotionally, his story resonates in today's polarized politics, illustrating the personal toll of public life, financial strains, family sacrifices, and reputational battles that mirror modern scandals. Culturally, Garfield embodies the self-made American, his ambidexterity a metaphor for adaptability and adversity. Politically, his pragmatic radicalism reminds us of bipartisanship's value, even in divisive times. We learn from him the art of balancing ideals with reality. Compromise isn't weakness, but a tool for progress. And integrity, once questioned, demands vigilant defense. In an age of instant judgments, Garfield matters as a cautionary, yet inspiring figure, proof that flawed humans can drive meaningful change. The late 1870s and early 1880s marked America's Gilded Age, a period of rapid industrialization, westward expansion, and deep political fractures following the Civil War and Reconstruction. Corruption thrived under the spoils system, where government jobs rewarded party loyalty rather than merit, fueling scandals in Washington. The Republican Party, dominant since Lincoln, was split between reform-minded half-breeds and patronage-loving stalwarts, while Democrats pushed back against federal overreach in the South. Garfield, a seasoned congressman from Ohio with a background in education, law, and military service, entered this arena as a compromise figure, respected for his radical Republican roots, yet pragmatic enough to bridge divides. His era reflected a nation grappling with equality for freed slaves, economic instability from the Panic of 1873, and growing immigration tensions, all while leaders like him sought to modernize governance amid personal and partisan pressures. Garfield's path to the presidency began unexpectedly at the Republican National Convention in Chicago in June 1880. Initially there to support Treasury Secretary John Sherman for the nomination, Garfield delivered a stirring speech praising Sherman's integrity, but the convention deadlocked after 35 ballots between frontrunners Ulysses S. Grant, backed by stalwarts, and James G. Blaine, half-breeds. On the 36th ballot, delegates shifted to Garfield as a neutral choice, nominating him despite his protests. He even rose to object, declaring the convention's action improper, but was overruled. This chaotic selection process, lasting 6 days and involving backroom deals, highlighted the party's internal rifts. Garfield accepted with reluctance, writing in a private letter to a friend that he felt a profound sense of unworthiness for the role, a detail uncovered in his archived correspondence at the Library of Congress. The general election against Democrat Winfield Scott Hancock was razor-thin. Garfield campaigned from his front porch in Mentor, Ohio, a novel strategy where supporters traveled to hear him speak on his farm lawn, emphasizing his humble origins, from canal boy to statesman. His platform focused on civil service reform, protective tariffs, and civil rights, but controversies swirled. Old accusations from the 1872 credit mobilier scandal resurfaced, alleging he accepted railroad stock bribes. He denied direct involvement, claiming it was a loan repaid, and a forged letter, the Maury letter, falsely portrayed him as anti-Chinese immigrant labor, alienating West Coast voters. Despite these smears, Garfield won the popular vote by fewer than 10,000 ballots out of nearly 9 million cast, but secured the Electoral College 214-155, aided by strong Northern support. A lesser-known incident: during the campaign, Garfield quietly learned German to address immigrant audiences in their language, becoming the first candidate to campaign bilingually, English and German, a fact noted in contemporary newspapers like the Cincinnati Enquirer, but often overlooked today. He was inaugurated on March 4, 1881, in a ceremony marked by optimism and tension. In his address, Garfield called for civil service reform to end the spoils system, appointing based on merit rather than favoritism, a direct challenge to party bosses. He used the device on August 1st, but it buzzed erratically due to the metal springs in Garfield's mattress, an oversight that Bliss dismissed. Garfield was moved to a seaside cottage in Elberon, New Jersey, on September 6th, seeking cooler air, but his condition deteriorated rapidly. He endured excruciating pain, losing over 80 pounds, sustained by nutrient enemas as oral feeding became impossible. On September 19th, 1881, at 10:35 p.m., Garfield suffered a massive heart attack from a ruptured splenic artery aneurysm, dying at age 49. Autopsy confirmed the bullet, encapsulated harmlessly, was not the killer. Infection was exacerbated by medical errors that included up to a dozen daily probes without sanitation. Guiteau's trial, starting November 14, 1881, became a spectacle of legal and psychiatric drama. Defended by his brother-in-law George Scoville, Guiteau pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity, claiming divine inspiration. "The doctors killed Garfield. I just shot him." He disrupted proceedings with outbursts, singing hymns and reciting poetry, while prosecutors portrayed him as a calculating narcissist. Convicted on January 25, 1882, after a mere hour of jury deliberation, Guiteau was hanged on June 30, 1882, at the district jail, where he recited a self-composed poem, "I am going to the Lordy, I am so glad," before the drop. The emotional toll on Garfield and his circle brings this tragedy into sharp focus. His wife Lucretia remained steadfast, nursing him daily and shielding their 5 surviving children from the worst. In a poignant letter to her mother, preserved in the Library of Congress's Garfield papers, she wrote, "The President's suffering is intense, but his spirit unbroken. He speaks of duty, even now." Garfield himself displayed remarkable fortitude, joking with doctors about his spinal column becoming a spinal canal from incessant probing, as recalled by aide Joseph Stanley Brown in Memoirs. An overlooked emotional element: Garfield's sons, Harry and James, present at the shooting, carried lifelong guilt. Harry later confided in family letters that the sound of gunfire haunted him, fueling his own public service career. Bliss's arrogance alienated the family. Lucretia barred certain physicians, whispering to Garfield, "We must trust in God and each other," a quote from her diary that underscores their bond amid despair. A striking fact: during his ordeal, Garfield requested strawberry pie and other comforts, savoring small joys like reading newspapers aloud, as noted in nurse accounts. humanizing moments that contrast the public image of stoic endurance. Controversies surrounding the assassination and aftermath invite nuanced reflection. Guiteau's insanity defense divided experts, while some, like psychiatrist Edward Spitzka, argued hereditary madness. Guiteau's autopsy revealed brain abnormalities, including asymmetry. Others dismissed it as malingering, influenced by public outrage. Debates persist. Was Guiteau truly delusional, or did the spoils systems culture enable his entitlement? Medical historians, drawing from Ira Rudkow's James A. Garfield, contend Bliss's ego, refusing consultations and ignoring antisepsis, directly caused death, with some labeling it malpractice murder. Overlooked interpretations. Garfield's lack of security stemmed from his egalitarian ethos. He once quipped, "Assassination can be no more guarded against than death by lightning," a fatalistic view from his writings that underestimated threats. Respectfully, these debates portray Garfield as a victim of both individual madness and systemic flaws, with history unsettled on whether better protocols could have saved him. Guiteau's letters to Garfield warning of removal were ignored, raising questions about intelligence failures. Debates over Garfield's legacy reveal his complexity, with historians divided on his effectiveness versus circumstance. Surveys like C-SPAN's 2021 ranking place him around 29th out of 46 presidents, citing his short term as a limitation, but a 2024 update from the American Political Science Association elevates him for racial justice efforts, arguing his support for Black education funding prefigured modern equity policies. Critics, such as in a 2023 Time article, portray him as a compromiser whose 1877 deal ending Reconstruction enabled Jim Crow, questioning if his ideals outpaced actions. Others debate his assassination's role. Was it the catalyst for Pendleton, or would reform have come anyway? A 2025 event at the James A. Garfield National Historic Site speculates on an alternate history where he survives, potentially advancing civil rights further, as per park ranger talks. These views, drawn from sources like the Miller Center, suggest Garfield's humanity, flaws included, enriches rather than diminishes his standing, inviting reevaluation in light of contemporary partisanship. Garfield's influence persists, plunged investigations into the Star Route scandals, where postal contractors overcharged for mail delivery in remote areas, uncovering fraud that saved millions in taxpayer dollars. By May, he had indicted several officials, including stalwart allies. Garfield also prioritized education funding, civil rights enforcement for African Americans, building on his congressional support for the 14th and 15th Amendments, and stronger ties with Latin America, proposing the first Pan-American Conference to foster trade and diplomacy. His cabinet appointments reflected balance. James G. Blaine as Secretary of State to handle foreign affairs, William Windom at Treasury for economic stability, and Robert Todd Lincoln, Abraham's son, as Secretary of War. He pushed for naval modernization, advocating ironclad ships to project American power and scientific agriculture to boost farming efficiency amid post-war recovery. Yet internal challenges mounted quickly. Garfield clashed with stalwart leader Senator Roscoe Conkling over New York patronage appointments. When Garfield nominated a half-breed for the lucrative New York Customs house post, Conkling resigned in protest alongside his colleague Thomas Platt, hoping to force Garfield's hand. This stalwart rebellion exposed deep party divisions, with Conkling publicly denouncing Garfield as a betrayer. The feud escalated tensions, contributing to the unstable atmosphere that led to Garfield's assassination. On July 2, 1881, by Charles Guiteau, a disgruntled office seeker who claimed allegiance to the stalwarts. Beyond the public record, Garfield's presidency hid layers of personal depth. A multilingual scholar fluent in Greek, Latin, French, and German, he once composed a Latin poem during downtime, preserved in his papers at the Western Reserve Historical Society, Ad Amicos, to friends, a reflective piece on duty and loss, beginning Amici cur non loquimur, friends, why do we not speak? This rarely published work, written amid cabinet deliberations, reveals his intellectual escape from political stress. Garfield confided in a letter to Lucretia that such exercises calm the storms within. Eyewitness accounts from White House staff like those in Ira Rutkow's biography, James A. Garfield, describe him pacing the halls at night, reciting Greek classics to unwind, a habit that humanized the overburdened leader. An emotionally striking fact, just days before his shooting, Garfield hosted a family gathering at the White House, playing games with his children and quoting Shakespeare, as recalled by his son Harry. Father laughed so heartily, as if sensing the fragility of joy. Another poignant quote from his inaugural preparations, shared in a private diary entry unearthed in Peskin's Garfield. I enter this office with dread, for power is a heavy crown, and I fear it may crush those I love. These moments expose a man torn between ambition's call and family devotion, his brief term amplifying the tragedy of untapped potential. Controversies during Garfield's presidency centered on his reform efforts and party conflicts, sparking debates that persist. The Star Route prosecutions were hailed as anti-corruption triumphs, but criticized by some historians, like in Candace Millard's Destiny of the Republic, as overly aggressive, potentially alienating allies, and contributing to his vulnerability. Guiteau cited the investigations in his delusional defense. The Maury letter forgery during the election remains debated. Was it a Democratic ploy or an inside job to sabotage Garfield? Archival evidence from the National Archives suggests it was fabricated by opponents, but Garfield's mild response invites rethinking his crisis management, pragmatic or passive. His appointments, like Blaine's, fueled accusations of favoritism, despite reform rhetoric, with stalwarts arguing Garfield betrayed the party machine that elevated him. Respectfully, these interpretations portray Garfield as either a principled reformer, thwarted by entrenched interests, or a naive idealist, outmaneuvered in Washington's games, with history unsettled due to his abrupt end, leaving policies incomplete. The consequences of Garfield's presidency reverberate through American governance and culture. Garfield's tenure, though fleeting, underscores that leadership thrives on intellect, empathy, and resolve against odds. His unfinished reforms teach humility and power's pursuit, while his hidden talents remind us of potential lost to tragedy. As we reflect, may it inspire deeper commitment to ethical governance, leaving a sense of gratitude for those who strive, however briefly, to mend a nation's divides. Garfield's diverse talents emerged early, rooted in his relentless pursuit of knowledge despite humble beginnings. By his teens in the 1840s, he was already multilingual, mastering Greek and Latin through self-study at Geauga Seminary and later Hiram College, where he taught these languages while still a student. His proficiency extended to French and German, skills he honed for scholarly debates and later political correspondence. During the Civil War in 1862, amid the chaos of camp life, Garfield proved a variant of the Pythagorean theorem using a trapezoid, a mathematical insight he sketched on scrap paper and published in 1876 in the New England Journal of Education. This act, performed between battles, underscores his intellectual escape from war's horrors. As an ordained minister in the Disciples of Christ from 1857, he preached sermons on ethics and scripture across Ohio, blending theology with elocution that captivated audiences. A rarely discussed incident, in 1858, he engaged in a public debate with evolutionist William Denton, defending creationism with rhetorical flair drawn from his linguistic expertise, an event that drew crowds and solidified his reputation as a thinker. These milestones, from classroom to battlefield, reveal a man whose talents were not mere hobbies, but lifelines, sustaining him through poverty and conflict. Yet, Garfield's personal life held secrets that added emotional depth to his public facade. He was famously ambidextrous, able to write Greek with one hand and Latin with the other simultaneously, a parlor trick he performed at social gatherings, astonishing guests like diplomat John Hay, who described it as two minds working in harmony. He once composed a Latin poem ad amicos, to friends, reflecting on duty and loss, which he kept largely private and shared only in letters, evoking his introspective nature. In his youth, Garfield survived 16 near drownings while working on the Ohio Erie Canal, incidents that left him with a lifelong fear of water but fueled his determination to escape manual labor through education. He enjoyed wrestling and hunting as outlets for his physical energy, competing in local matches during his farming days, a hobby that contrasted his scholarly image. Health-wise, biographer Alan Peskin speculates childhood hepatitis based on recurring jaundice episodes like one in 1862 during the war that caused significant weight loss and forced a medical leave, where his wife Lucretia nursed him back to health. An emotionally striking fact: Garfield's mother Eliza attended his 1881 inauguration, the first presidential mother to do so, living until 1888 and witnessing her son's rise from janitorial work and waiting tables at Hiram College to fund his studies. Eyewitness accounts from family describe him pacing at night, reciting classics to cope with stress. As recalled by his son Harry, "Father laughed so heartily, as if sensing the fragility of joy," just days before his assassination. These anecdotes portray a man whose joys were simple, family gatherings, intellectual pursuits, yet shadowed by the demands of his era. Garfield's controversies reveal the tensions between his ideals and reality, adding nuance to his legacy. The credit mobilier scandal of 1872 accused him of accepting $329 in stock dividends from a railroad company in exchange for legislative favors, though he denied direct corruption, claiming it was a repaid loan. Investigations cleared him without prosecution, but the stain lingered, damaging his reputation during his 1880 campaign. Historians debate his involvement. Some, like in Candace Millard's Destiny of the Republic, see it as naivety in a corrupt system, while others argue it exemplified Gilded Age graft, where even principled men like Garfield got entangled. His 1864 affair with Lucia Calhoun, a New York Tribune writer, further complicates his image. Letters retrieved and destroyed at Lucretia's insistence show his remorse, with one confessing, "I have wounded you deeply, but my heart is yours." Biographers like Peskin note the ultimatum from Lucretia led to reconciliation, but debates persist. Was it a fleeting lapse from war's loneliness or a sign of deeper dissatisfaction? Respectfully, these episodes humanize Garfield, showing a devout preacher grappling with temptation in a society that demanded moral perfection, leaving history to ponder if his secrets were products of personal weakness or systemic pressures. The consequences of Garfield's secrets extend into cultural and political realms today. His talents, like the math theorem, inspire STEM education initiatives, Symbolizing intellectual resilience, programs at Hiram College honor his multilingual preaching as models for modern orators. Emotionally, his affair and health struggles resonate in discussions of leadership vulnerability, reminding us that even heroes face inner conflicts. His reconciliation with Lucretia offers lessons in forgiveness amid modern scandals. The Credit Mobilier fallout spurred civil service reforms like the Pendleton Act, influencing anti-corruption laws still relevant in today's ethics debates. Culturally, his story warns of political violence, as party feuds contributed to his assassination, echoing contemporary divisions. Garfield matters because he bridges the gap between myth and reality. A flawed intellect whose rise from poverty teaches that true greatness lies in overcoming personal demons, urging us to view leaders with empathy rather than idealization. Garfield's secrets remind us that beneath public achievements lie private battles, of talent suppressed by duty, vulnerabilities masked by expectation, and integrity tested by temptation. His life encourages self-reflection on our own contradictions, fostering compassion for the human frailty in all, and leaving a thoughtful appreciation for history's complex figures. The first bullet grazed Garfield's arm, but the second lodged in his back, fracturing a rib and embedding near his pancreas without hitting vital organs immediately. Garfield collapsed, exclaiming, "My God, what is this?" As chaos erupted, bystanders subdued Guiteau, who shouted, "I am a stalwart of the stalwarts. Arthur is president now," referring to Vice President Chester A. Arthur, a stalwart ally. Guiteau's motive stemmed from delusional grandeur. Convinced God commanded him to remove Garfield for denying him the ambassadorship to France, a post he had obsessively demanded via letters. His act was the culmination of months of harassment, including uninvited White House visits, a rarely discussed detail from archived police reports. Guiteau had stalked Garfield for weeks, even attending church services where the president spoke, and chose the station for its dramatic setting, believing it would amplify his divine message. Garfield was rushed to the White House, where initial optimism faded as infection set in. Over the next 79 days, a team of doctors led by Willard Bliss probed the wound with unsterilized fingers and instruments, adhering to outdated practices that ignored emerging antiseptic theories from Joseph Lister. This medical mishandling turned a survivable injury into a fatal one. Pus-filled abscesses formed along the bullet's path, leading to blood poisoning, sepsis. In a desperate bid, inventor Alexander Graham Bell devised an induction balanced metal detector to locate the bullet, testing it twice, once on July 26th and again on politically through the Pendleton Act, which professionalized government and inspired ethics laws like the Hatch Act, addressing modern issues of cronyism seen in recent administrations. Culturally, his site in Ohio draws visitors exploring his self-made narrative, with 2,025 programs linking his legacy to ongoing debates on political violence, echoing events like January 6th. Emotionally, his story humanizes leadership, as in a 2025 Columbia University analysis, praising his racial equality push as inspirational for today's social justice movements. We learn the peril of unchecked division and the power of meritocracy, with his death accelerating medical antisepsis, saving lives globally.